I'm not talking about big culture, I'm talking about small culture here. Look at the cars you drive, the way you cut your hair, the way that you dress, the houses you live in, the part of town in which you live. All these things. I think that's influenced by your friends, or you want to be your friends. You bet it is. You feel a connection with this people, this group of people. So you become like them. If they do something, you're going to do, maybe kind of follow suit, right? So they realize marketers are intelligent. They realize this. So they realize that if they're going to, in the middle of the day, market fabric softener to a crowd, who's their target audience? Good stay-at-home moms, probably. So who's going to be on that commercial selling that product? Is it a 65-year-old retired, greasy-looking guy saying, "Hey, try this fabric"? No. Who is it? Yeah, most likely this young, attractive, stay-at-home mother, right? Why? Just explain it to you. So why is she on the commercial instead of the 65-year-old?
Because those are the ones that are mostly likely to use it.
If you are at home, let's say you're 35 years old, and you see her using that, and she's happy, and family life is good. Why? Because she uses fabric softener. You think, if she does that, yeah, well, it must make sense for me to do that too. Are you telling me I can have that lifestyle? We'll talk more about this in persuasion, but yeah, you can have this great lifestyle if you just use this fabric softener. I can be like this person. This person's kind of like me, but I can have more of that lifestyle. So identification is important here, and it's important in testimony. That person is more or less giving a testimony. It's not always a hard testimony like when you look at infomercials. This product worked for me. Here's my face before and after. You're still thinking. I saw a commercial this past weekend of this. Have you all seen these plastic things you put on your eyelid? You all seen these? What are they called? Lift? Something lift? Eye lift? That scared me to death. I was like, she looked better before than after. Y'all seen this? It's a piece of plastic kind of shaped like an eye. I mean, like a kind of a slant, like a half moon type thing. Well, you close your eye, and if you have like wrinkles here, and your eyelid just looks normal. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. It just looks normal. You stick this in right here, and it stretches. It kind of stretches that out. And these women are all of a sudden like, and it showed them one side without, one side with. And they're like, before and after. And I was scared. I was like, well, why would you want it? I mean, that's not working. I'm not sure. Anyway, so it's before and after. That's a testimony. But when a woman is on television and she's got a happy life, pouring this fabric softener in, and her marriage is great because she uses fabric softener. That's a testimony as well. Just not as direct. Okay, the two different types of testimony we're going to look at. We're going to look at expert testimony. Expert testimony to begin with, and then peer testimony. But let's look at expert testimony first. We see expert testimony in a courtroom. If we were talking along here one day and I was teaching class, blah, 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 and then Tiffany says, I don't agree with you. And so I get really upset, and I pull out the gun I've got in my pocket, and I shoot her dead. Shoot her dead right here. And I just go on with class, like it didn't happen. Okay, pretty soon, pretty soon we've got the police here, and I'm taken off to jail, and I have a court date. Now, if I have a good lawyer, in some situations, I say good lawyer loosely here, I would be assessed psychologically, right? And somebody would come in and say, on the day of my trial, Dr. So-and-so of the Mental Institute would come in and say, it's my professional opinion that at the time of the murder, Mr. Velton, in those brief seconds, was mentally incapacitated. He is now a sane citizen. It will never happen again. Why do we believe that?
It's supposed to be an expert.
But we believe it, right? People are like, oh, makes sense. No, it doesn't make a bit of sense. I just shot somebody. But for some reason, we believe what they had to say. It's powerful, isn't it? That's expert testimony. Can you imagine if on that same day, we have Stacey Owen here, a student in the class, to come and give her a psychological assessment. Well, it's my professional opinion that he was mentally incapacitated at the time of the murder. We should all just let him off the hook. The jury thinks. I don't think so, right? It's not that she's not intelligent, but she doesn't have this Dr. So-and-so of this institute title with her, right? She's not an expert on brains. People flaking out for a moment and shooting somebody. So we don't believe what she said. One person versus another person. This person's an expert. So this is expert testimony. Now, in a speech, we don't have the luxury of doing our research and finding Dr. So-and-so at Oklahoma State University and saying, would you mind to come in here in class with me and tell everybody what you were just telling me? No, we've got to say that. We've got to say, according to this source, this credible source, right? Give that expert testimony. This is what this person says. And if it's a good source, we believe it, right? Credibility goes up. That's good credibility of the source, but your credibility goes up as well because you're using good sources to back this up, good testimony. That's different from what's called peer testimony. Peer testimony is like in the commercial when somebody looks like you, sounds like you, dresses like you, same age group, same demographic, all this thing. This is peer testimony. If I'm a frustrated housewife because I have trouble cutting tomatoes in the evening for dinner, well, guess what? Here's the infomercial with a woman who looks like me, about my age, slicing tomatoes with this new knife. Look how happy she is. I could be that happy as well. She's like me. She looks like me. It looks like that would work for me as well. We may not go through all these thoughts, right? But it works. It's pure testimony. You know, in a courtroom, pure testimony would be more like if on the day of the trial, I was about to say Tiffany is there, but Tiffany would not be there unless they rolled her in. But she's not going to be there. But say they call John to the stand. Why do they call John to the stand?
I was here.
Pure testimony, but he was there, right? An eyewitness account, pure testimony. Somebody who's just an average person, right? Saying, here's what I saw firsthand. Much like in the television commercials. Here's my experience firsthand. So again, this is important. On a professional testimony or an expert testimony, we're using this big name, right? It says, here's my research, here's what I found. A peer testimony is still credible if you said, my grandmother has used this before, and here's her experience with this. Here's what she says about it. That's still very valid. That's still credible, isn't it? Your grandmother may not be an expert, but your grandmother is like you all, and she's used it, right? Better yet, a friend of mine who's a college student at Auburn or whatever, it's like you all, use this and it works. That is a peer testimony. But that person is like me and it worked for them. That's good. Still need to cite that source. Give that source some credibility. Make sure they know this person is like you. That's what I'm expert. So it's expert and peer testimony. Very powerful. Okay, the last thing here, so we've looked at supporting your ideas, supporting what you're saying through examples, statistics, and testimony. And we're going to look here at the end at using direct quotation and paraphrases. I think we've already touched on this a little bit, but do you know how many words of somebody else you can use before it is considered plagiarism? I'm talking back-to-back words.
10.
10's a good guess. I mean, you still say that it came from this source. However, you're using them in succession, the words. How many of those words in a row can you use before it's plagiarism?
Is it even words or just sentence?
Words. 5 words. It's about 3. If you use about 3 or more words of someone else's work, even though you might source them, say according to this source, if you're quoting 3 or more words without saying that this is a quote, then that's called plagiarism.
So you know what the quotation line is.
Right. That's different from a paraphrase. Where a paraphrase is where I say, according to John Persons in his research at the University of Arkansas, and I quote, you signal it, right? Maybe with your hands, these cheesy little hand motions. Or you might say, and I quote, give it word for word. You can put it on there, read it off if you have to, and say end quote. Some people just pause. Some people change their voice a little bit to signal they're speaking speaking for somebody else, and then they go back to their regular presentation quality. Then that's a direct quote versus a paraphrase. Paraphrase just says, here's what they said in terms in which you can understand. It's not to be demeaning, it's just saying, according to this source, here's what they say, here's what that means. You're explaining it in your own words.